Hey there, everyone. Welcome back. This is the Being Formed podcast. My name is Adam Ormord. I'm the host of the show. I'm also the president and the co-founder of LifePoint Resources, along with my wife, Rebecca. Today, we have a special guest for you. Before we get to our guest, I want to just thank you for your patience. A little bit behind the scenes, this podcast, putting it together is one of my greatest joys. I love doing it. I love recording it. I even love the editing because I get to listen to the conversation all over again. So it's just really good for my own inside work. But what happens when your computer goes haywire and it requires a hard reboot? Macs aren't supposed to do that, right? That's what I tell everybody all the time. I don't understand what happened, but my files for this podcast were all actually lost when I did a hard reboot because they weren't saved in the cloud. There you go. And so the last few episodes have been a little wonky, trying to get things back the way they were just when I thought I had them dialed in. So things aren't as consistent as I would hope, but that's okay because God is teaching me that things don't have to be perfect, right? So thanks for your patience in that. We're trying to rebrand even just a bit the podcast to try to dial things in again for you so that you know what you're getting every time you tune in. So thanks for your patience. Okay, so today's interview is with Steve Smith. Steve and his wife Gwen founded the Potter's Inn in Colorado. They had this retreat center up in the mountains. And so on September 4th, 2009, that's my birthday, September 4th, my wife said, hey, why don't we go up to the mountains and we can walk the prayer trail? And you can listen to the interview with Steve in terms of how I initially reacted to that idea. But I'm so thankful and so appreciative that that space was there, not only for me, but for so many people to come and do some inner work with God in terms of the care of their soul. It changed my life. It changed our trajectory. And here we are. LifePoint Resources really is a result of those days and that time spent with Steve and his team at the Potter's Inn. So this is a very special release date, even September 4th. Again, my birthday. So I want to let you know a little bit about Steve Smith. You can read about him online, but he's an author. He's written several books: The Lazarus Life, Embracing Soul Care, Soul Custody, Soul Shaping, The Inside Job. So he's written a lot on this idea of soul care, and he's practiced it a lot. Let's begin the conversation with Steve Smith. Steve Smith, thank you. Thanks for being with us.
I'm so glad to be with you. It's exciting just to close the gap of the time it's been since I've been with you and Rebecca and watched you from a distance, but then loving you when we live so close. And Rebecca worked with Gwen and I in the critical days of the launch of Potter's Inn and our retreat and so much. So we have such rich history.
Yes, we do. You're sitting on this back beautiful patio, it looks like, at your home in North Carolina, up in the mountains. It looks very peaceful. And so I want to ask you, how is it with your soul?
That's a good question. It is really well with my soul. It's been a journey, to get to Brevard and to build an off-ramp to disengage from a ministry that we founded back in the year 2000 and to build this beautiful, extravagant, worldwide ministry called Potter's Inn and to build our own retreat center. So those years that I knew you, Adam, were years of building and really laying foundations and growing and pioneering. That would be the movement, because even this conversation that we're going to have today about listening and spiritual direction, that wasn't known back in the year 2000, at least to the constituency that I was living in and you were in, kind of the evangelical bubble, so to speak. Even the word soul care was not known. I think Gwen and I helped pioneer that, and we bear the wounds from people that didn't like that term back in the year 2000 and challenged us and thought we were liberal and thought we were new age and thought we were everything and wanted to burn my books when I kept talking about this and just couldn't get it.
Mm.
It's hard for people who are now in the river of soul care and spiritual direction to really understand that this river is really a new river,
Mm.
um, for the especially the evangelical church and a wider audience. And we need to bow and acknowledge that we didn't create this, and we didn't stumble upon it, and I didn't discover it, and I was discovered by it.
Hmm.
you know i I started my life as a pastor, and Gwen and I pastored churches internationally and in the United States for 25 years. But it was really meeting Dallas Willard in a monastery back in 1996 that my eyes were open to a deeper end of the pool
Hmm.
that I had ever been swimming in. And I had read about the deep end of the pool, but I don't think I knew how to get there. And I did not know how to swim in it. I
Hmm.
knew how to visit it and quickly go to the side and get up on the ladder and go back to the shallows. But the deep end of the pool of what we're going to talk about today is really one of embracing mystery and giving up, letting go, and unlearning all the linear ways that we have learned in our Western American way of how to do Christianity, how to be Christians, and how to relax and in the deeper end of the pool and the life of what you're talking about in spiritual formation and being formed. And so Dallas Willard, if anybody knows me, knows that he had profound impact on my life. I've written about this in my book, The Lazarus Life. But, he exposed me that the abundant life really is possible.
Hmm.
And just that, I think, for people that, like me, who are hardwired, highly motivated, type A driven people, we're not all that way, but I am recovering in every single one of those ways.
Hmm.
And the way I have recovered is through learning what we're going to talk about today and to unlearn how you do the Christian life and to
Mm.
relearn through ancient paths and proven pathways of men and women that historically pioneered this way of how to live the abundant life, and that the abundant life is not the exhausted life.
Hmm.
And it is a life that is marked by love. And what we're going to talk about today, to listen is to love. And so, really, through Dallas, I got validated, I think, by my intuition, affirmed in my re education, and really blessed by Dallas. um, I shared the vision of Potter's Inn with him in a spiritual direction session when he was my spiritual director. That I think there should be a ministry like Potter's Inn, a place people could come to detox from all this and to recover their souls that they had lost in the tidal waves and the tsunamis of busyness and performance based Christianity and all the things. And Dallas blessed it and said, "We need this ministry, Steve. Go back home and do it." And so
Hmm.
4 years later, the doors open for Gwen and I to move and to leave the Bible Belt of the South and to start over from scratch. And we started in our home, and that's where I met Rebecca and eventually met you. Rebecca became our right and left hands to help us in every aspect of our ministry and help me write my books and put them together and keep our books and keep our donors happy and all the things that she did. So the birth of that, Adam, was, I think I just want to come back with a yellow highlighter to say that people in 2024 or 2025, when they're listening, most people that I'm listening to and talking to, they're just not aware of the hard ascent that
Hmm.
it has been to pioneer um, the whole mission of soul care and spiritual formation. There has been tremendous resistance to it, especially from evangelicals.
Hmm.
And so, we bear all of those wounds, and all of that has gone into really help me now in my own life to feel released from so much, to really um, feel more freedom than I've ever felt. And I'm still doing some spiritual direction. I'm doing writing now, but we're clearly on our off ramp. I'm not doing retreats anymore, and things that we really miss, but we're really living this life that we have written about. And we just are turning 70 this year. So it's a big year for us to really embrace our own life, how we want to live, who we want to live for, and how we want to do it. So
Hmm.
that's what we're doing.
Hmm. I want to say thank you for being a trailblazer, for putting yourself kind of in the line of fire.
There are many of us. We're not the only ones
Mhm.
that who pioneered this, but it's wonderful that we've come so far, and that there's so many people like you and Rebecca, and so many different movements that are starting, that this seed, it's not the first time it's been planted, but I really
Mhm.
think it is the first time in the evangelical garden, um, that we're not a weed, and we're not going to be plucked out. This is a fruit of the spirit movement that God is really growing.
Hmm. Yeah. Steve, when did you move from, uh, I think you lived in North Carolina originally, right?
Yeah, we moved from Colorado to Charlotte, North Carolina, 3 years ago, and we
Okay.
thought we were going to live our life returning home. That's where we're both from,
Mm.
and we thought that, but Charlotte was just too big and crazy, and
Hmm.
the mountains of Colorado messed us up, and so we chose beauty to be oxygen
Yeah.
for us, and so we found this quiet little town of 4,000
Yeah.
people surrounded by the national forest.
Yeah.
No interstates. You have to drive 30 or 40 minutes to get on an interstate. So
Yeah.
we're tucked away and secluded, and it just fit the life that we wanted:
Hmm.
quiet and more reflective, and more where I can live in trees. I'm in my office, which is on the second floor, which is a tree house.
Hmm.
It's a glass tree house, literally, that you walk
Hmm.
into, and so
Wow.
I'm surrounded by beauty, and it just every day blesses me to be here.
Yeah. Well, that totally fits with when you had the retreat center in Divide. So much of my story is about my experience at the Potter's Inn, on the prayer trail, and even just the signs along the way on the prayer trail, like let the birds be our guides.
Let the birds be our teachers, and flowers the theologians. That's a quote from Martin Luther
Yeah.
back in the 16th century.
Yeah. The first time I went up there was right after Rebecca took the job working for you in 2009. So it was right around August. I think she met you, came home from the interview, by the way, and I said, "So what is this? Is it a Christian ministry?" She said, "I think so." Like, that's how
That
that's
was
how
her. Even Rebecca, even my assistant, questioned us.
she was like, I think so. It's soul care. I don't really know what it is. But for my birthday, which was September 4th, she said, Hey, I have a great idea. I have to go up to Divide. We lived in the Springs at the time. So I have to go up to Divide to the Potter's Inn, and I need to restock their prayer trail guides. And I got a couple other things I need to do up there. So I thought it'd be a good thing for you to do for your birthday is come up with me and you can walk the prayer trail.
Awesome.
And I remember thinking though, Steve, like, what? Like,
Da-da-da-da-da-da.
why would I want to go spend my birthday walking a prayer trail? So I had a lot of my own work to do, and that was as a pastor in ministry as well. So that thing did get a hold of me, that ministry, and I don't know if you remember this, but I wanted to do what you were doing, and so I actually went and raised some support and came to work with you for about a year. I call it an internship. So
Yes, that's what we
that's what
called it.
that's what it
That's
felt
right.
like to me. But the other little blast from the past thing I want to share with you, I wonder if you remember this. The first time I met you after Rebecca took the job, we met up at a Italian restaurant on the north side of the Springs and came in and we sat at a booth and you just started asking me some questions and I ended up pouring out in front of you my whole story, my whole dark, deep story where Rebecca knew about it. But I mean, I just laid it all bare before you, and I was shocked. I think you might have been shocked. I think Rebecca was shocked. Like, what was like, where did that come from?
Mhm.
And I remember thinking, well, that's you. That's the kind of presence, the kind of listening presence you bring with you everywhere you go. I sensed that from the first moment I met you.
Hmm. Well, I remember your beautiful story that you shared with me, and um, your vulnerability and your brokenness and your thirst, and that drew me to you.
So that is a good segue. The timing of this conversation is really perfect because on July 29th, 2024, you wrote an article on Substack. And this is where people can go and see what you're writing, what you're thinking about these days. And the article was called Deep Listening Might Save Us.
Hmm.
I just want to start with quoting what you said at the very beginning of the article. You said, "It has been said to listen is to love. I agree. I am best loved when someone is deeply listening to me. I give love when I choose to listen and to keep myself from talking, responding, sharing my opinion, and sharing any advice when someone else is talking."
Hmm.
So if deep listening might save us, why?
Mhm.
Why is that being listened to, just like you did to me, for me, and I watched you do for so many people? Why is that such an integral part of our own coming home
Hmm.
to God's love?
Hmm. I love that you read that the way you did, and the meaning and the integration, Adam, that you have in your own life, to grow as a listener. I think hardly anybody I know was ever taught how to listen. We are taught from elementary school how to give talks on math and write science projects and do expositions in our writing, and to talk and to get things out. And even in college, especially in college and in grad school, and most sadly in seminary education and theological education, there are no courses in how to listen. There are courses in how to evangelize and tell other people about Jesus and the good news. And there are courses in preaching, how to speak better and more effectively. And there are courses in how to study the scripture. But there really, to my knowledge, in any theological institution that I'm aware of, and I hope I'm wrong,
Hmm.
and maybe the listeners can correct me, but there is still not a course in how to listen, like at a 101 level or a 201 or a 401. And I am not the exception. I was not trained how to listen. I was born, in fact, as I talk and tell some of my story, I invite the listeners to reflect back on your own story of, what was listening ever taught from your mother or your father? How did you do that? What were dinner table conversations like? Were you taught to listen and respectively shut your mouth when your siblings are talking, or not out of anger when a parent says, "Listen to me, you need to make your bed up, you've got to clean your
Hmm.
room, you've got to do what I say."
Hmm.
That's not listening. And so, we can't demand of someone that they listen to us, even in marriage. Adam, Gwen and I have been married 44 years, and it wasn't until we were 60 in our marriage, so that was 10 years ago, that Gwen and I entered counseling in a 2-year relationship with a counselor in Woodland Park, Colorado, on this very theme, because we weren't listening well with each other.
Hmm.
And I'll never forget Gwen saying it was my birthday coming up. And she said, "What would you like for your birthday?" And I turned at her. It was all stored up, but that question lanced, the wound really. And I said, I want you to listen to me. And she
Mm.
said, what are you talking about? And I said, I really need you to listen. And I want to listen. And we had to kind of turn palms up with each other to say, it was so shocking at our age and our stage as leaders in the ministry world, as an author and, excuse me, speaker, to really come up empty to each other and say, I just knew after at that time, so that was 34 years of marriage, that if we didn't learn to listen better, we're we're just not, probably, I don't know how we're going to walk into old age like this.
Mm-hmm.
And so we worked with a counselor that took us into 101, 201, 301, 401, and some PhD studying on how to really listen effectively to each other. And that began to change our whole understanding of soul care
Mm-hmm.
and how to do it. So I think we 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 tried to listen, and we really did listen, but in a
Mm-hmm.
way now I wish I could go back and redo
Mm.
every intensive I did with
Wow.
the thousands of people that we worked with and do it again, because I would do it differently. I would speak less, and I would lead with my ears.
Mm.
you know we all know that verse that James talks about, be quick to listen. But Eugene Peterson translates that so brilliantly when he said, lead with your ears,
Mm-hmm.
not with your tongue. And I just think that phrase, lead with your ears, should be engraved on the the pulpits of
Mm-hmm.
preachers and in the counseling rooms with counselors and in spiritual direction offices. Because I mean, sadly, Gwen and I met with a friend who wanted to meet us in Charlotte, who is a spiritual director. And we had a 2 hour lunch. And in that conversation, she did not ask Gwen and I one question. She talked about herself. She told us her story. She told us about her church, what she was doing and her practice. And I just sat there in utter shock and utter disbelief and dismay that you are calling yourself a spiritual director and you have no understanding of how to be in a reciprocal meeting to ask someone over lunch one question.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me your story. Tell me what you're doing. Tell me about Potter's Inn. Nothing came up, but we learned about her children, her grandchildren, her marriage, her church experience. And I just walked away, and it's like I just said, I've had it. I've
Mm-hmm.
had it. And so again, even in our marriages and our parenting as a grandparent, Adam, we've
Mm-hmm.
got 14 grandchildren. I'm just learning to really lead with my ears and my grandparenting, and to keep my mouth shut, to maybe ask a question. But when I take them on a walk in the woods up here in the mountains, or we sit by a river, their soul is so ripe and ready for the pick.
Mm-hmm.
There's just beautiful cherries and plums and oranges inside of them. And if I could just listen, I all that fruit could come out,
Mm-hmm.
and I could see their glory and they could see my glory. And so why is listening so important? I think it goes back to the ancients, Adam. I read where one of the ancients wrote, silence is God's first language.
Mm-hmm.
Silence is God's first language. And if that's true, and we know it is true, it's just like we never thought about that. We
Mm-hmm.
just thought that God was speaking and doing all the creation, but there was a silence that brewed over
Mm-hmm.
creation, you read about in Genesis. And in the ministry of Jesus, his posture to ask questions,
Mm-hmm.
to go off into quiet, Luke 5:14, he often withdrew to lonely places. If we can learn to listen in lonely places, then we will find our way, and we will find what love is. We will find that we are loved when we are listened.
Mm-hmm.
And when someone has the the chutzpah to listen to me, I know I'm loved. Because what does listening do? It validates that person. It gives that person dignity. It honors their soul when I am quiet and I let them kind of settle into their seat, settle into their heart, settle into their chest, and really, talk and speak. And I often use this metaphor back, before there were spigots in our kitchen. We used to have these pumps, and you would pump the well pump, the wellhead, you would pump and prime the pump. And finally, after about 6 pumps of that prime, pulling that lever, finally, after you primed it, the water would come out. And so when you and I were sitting in that restaurant back in 2009, I think I probably only primed the pump a few times, and
Right.
all of a sudden the water started coming out.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I think the question is, how do we prime the pump? And it's such a
Mm-hmm.
question that I'm asked so much about men. Many women will say, well, my husband doesn't talk. How can I get them to talk? And I talk about priming the pump. What is that like for a spouse to know how to prime the pump for their spouse, for their husband, for a man in particular? Since I'm a man, I know more about these things, that it's not such a natural thing for us, but that we can do this. We can connect our words with our heart, and we can say syllables and consonances and sentences that are the truth for us, if 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 we are safe, and
Mm-hmm.
if we will feel like we won't get clobbered, and you will let some of this water start coming out.
Mm-hmm. We're going to take a brief pause in our conversation with Steve Smith, but I encourage you to keep this podcast going rather than fast forwarding through this. Steve references a song, the lyrics to a song called Let Me Listen on his Substack article. I want to read those for you now. So maybe just settle a bit and consider, what would it be like to really show up listening, deeply listening, with a posture of humility, of curiosity, of attentiveness, the way these lyrics even describe. The song is called Let Me Listen, and the lyrics are by Charles Anthony Silvestri. We come from different places, you and I, on different paths we journey. Let me walk beside you for a while. Let me listen. So briefly do our lonely paths converge, yours and mine, along this human journey. What hollow loss to never hear your song. Let me listen. Let me listen as you tell your story, your triumphs and your tears, your trials and your fears. Your story never has been mine to tell, so let me listen. And if a silence is your choice to keep, then I will keep it with you, as long as we walk together. You and I will listen. Too long you've waited, too long, to share your journey, your song, so let me listen. All right, back to the conversation with Steve Smith. Silence is the first language of God. Oftentimes in spiritual direction, the subject matter has to do with, I'm coming to God, bringing my heart, bringing these requests, and I feel like God is silent. And that has a lot of negative connotations. And I wonder if that's because we're not modeling silence as the first language of God in
Yeah,
any of
it's
our ministry or relationships.
in any of our churches. I mean, uh, let me just be, let me just go here, that, only in liturgical churches, and not in every liturgical church, but in services where there is some liturgy and kind of prayers that you're watching this flow, is there this thing called a moment of silence. we don't have a moment of silence. We have been trained in Western evangelicalism to fill every space with noise and song. And we're actually don't know if there's silence, something must be wrong. The mic must have gone out, electricity.
Mhm.
We don't, not only are we not modeling it, we don't trust silence.
Exactly. Exactly.
We don't
Yes.
trust it because personally, we think, oh, God is quiet. I'm having this trouble. My daughter has cancer. My husband is having a health problem. My children are getting divorced. I'm talking to God, but he's quiet. You know, we feel like that is a negative thing because we're walking around with earbuds, listening to podcasts as we exercise. I live here at the National Forest and I can go on a trail, and I'd say 80% of the people I pass on the trail in the gorgeous Pisgah National Forest are wearing earbuds.
Yeah.
So they're not aware of the brook or the waterfall or the pileated woodpecker or the bluebird or the cardinal. They're missing all this language that is being spoken. And even if it's being spoken, it's like the key word, I think, Adam, is awareness. Are we growing in our awareness and attunement with the voice of God to know that God is speaking? We're just missing it.
Hmm. Hmm.
We could just be missing it.
We're filtering it, that silence, through this lens of God must be angry with me. I'm not worthy of love. I'm doing something wrong. I've got to figure out how to correct my behavior to get back in good graces with God. Again, I just wonder if we could model this, following the language of James here in chapter 1, if we could lead with our ears and create these safe spaces and let someone be loved back into the light,
Mm-hmm.
perhaps that's a way of someone being able to then have a new
Yeah,
filter, begin to see God differently and
absolutely.
understand
And
that silence.
I think we just can experiment and feel the freedom to experiment. Gwen and I attended a new service in an Anglican church in a mountain town not far, and the rector of this Anglican church wanted to start a service for all the workers, the international workers that have moved here to actually be waiters and helpers and bag boys and girls taking people's luggage into their rooms. And so he started this service, and we went to support him. But in the service, he gave his little homily of like 12 minutes. But then there was 3 minutes. He said, I want us just to have 3 minutes, which is a long time, Adam. If you did that in a big mega church, they would think God is upset or something's gone wrong. He gave us 3 minutes just to sit there and to let it marinate what he had just said, the text from the Old Testament, the gospel. We had a chance to integrate. God, what are you saying? What am I thinking? What are you thinking? What is this feeling inside? And so listening, even modeling as a family, Adam, it's so vital. I wish we could incorporate this in every aspect of our life, but like family meals to begin after everybody, you've had a hard day at work, Rebecca's had a hard day. What if we just said, welcome to the table? Let's just begin by being quiet and kind of just settling in. We're here. You've come from school, you've come from work, and just have a moment of quiet. And then that takes the pressure off of the dad having to say the blessing and the mama feeling, all tired out. Just, oh, it's good to be at this table. Let's just be quiet a moment. And you let that silence just for a few moments. I'm talking like in that case, maybe 30 seconds, maybe try one full minute. A minute's a long time for a teenager, but there isn't a people group on the place of the planet that needs to know about silence than teenagers and
Yeah.
tweens and generation
Yes. Yeah.
X, Y, and Z. We all need to know it. It's so healing. And I love the story of Henry Nouwen that he tells in his book. um, when he tells about meeting a friend. They hadn't seen each other in years. I think this was at Harvard or Yale where Henry taught, and he saw him and they sat down together, and it's like, oh, we're going to catch up. But Henry said, could we just begin by being quiet together? Not like, what have you done for the last 10 years? Even you and I, Adam, like, we got on Zoom here. I haven't seen you in a long time. And all I said, tell me, what have you been doing? But what could it be like if we just sat in a boardroom among elders, among deacons, among women's leaders, among spouses? Gwen and I, we practice silence in our marriage. We revere it. We cherish it because we both need time to show up in our own bodies and to be quiet and to find each other through silence. But at the dinner table, just putting kids together at bedtime, I've got these grandkids, and just to, rather than going and what'd you do in your day, and we can ask better questions. We can do a little daily examine, which is awesome to do. But what if we just lay down with our kids in bed, we hold them and they hold us? Let's just be quiet for a moment together. Let's just hold each other. And maybe at the end of a big, long hug, isn't it good to be held? Isn't it good to be loved? So we're missing out, Adam, on the dignity, the respect, the honoring, the glory that we have and we can offer each other because we're just so wordy. Everything's so wordy.
Yep. Yeah. Steve, you wrote, too many words is a form of abuse to the soul. I believe that's what you said. Too many words is a form of abuse to the soul. And then you wrote, I use the word abuse intentionally. Why? Because abuse is not just what is done to us, abuse is also what is withheld from us. When we are not heard, the message we get is, I don't matter. And that's not the truth. Listening validates that the one speaking matters.
The one speaking matters. And every spiritual director knows that the one speaking matters. But I think what I want to be an advocate for is what I call deep listening, not just listening, but listening with your body, soul, mind, and heart to somebody. That's different. When I was learning how to listen, that counselor, um, I won't mention her name because she's also retired, but she had a big picture behind her desk of African elephants, and Africa is where Gwen was born and raised in Ethiopia. But every time I went in there, I saw that, and finally I just said, "Why do you have a picture of elephants in your office?" And she says, "Well, I was born in Africa," which I knew, but I like to look at that when I'm counseling because elephants have big ears, and I like to use the image of wrapping my ears around you so that I will not miss anything you said.
Wow.
And I think, what if we did that as spouses? What if we learn and our husband and wife to wrap our ears? What if a 16-year-old could feel like their dad or their mom was really wrapping their ears around them? Because see, I know, and I know all of our listeners know, we know what it's like to not be listened to be in a line and somebody looking at us, but they're looking over our shoulder to see who's coming up next, maybe more important, or the real heavy hitter giver in the church that they can need to talk to. We all know that. And we know what it's like to not be. When you are not listened to, you're not given dignity. When you are not listened to, we're not giving honor. And when you're not listened to, you're not loved. To listen is to love.
Okay. So when I was young, little elementary school, I got made fun of for my big ears, probably even called Dumbo a time or two. So
Uh-huh.
now I can finally have a redemptive image of that, thanks
You
to
got
you.
beautiful ears. Yeah, I mean, it's just like that. I mean, imagine just for a moment God wrapping his holy ears around us. I don't want to miss anything that you have to say,
Yeah.
Steve.
Yeah.
Adam, I want to hear every monos, every groan I want
Hmm.
to hear.
Yeah.
It is a lot of re-imaging God. I think God is a listener,
Yeah.
and
And we are, when we listen well to someone, we are helping them re-image God that way.
I think bingo, we are.
Yeah, you wrote something so great. You've already talked about your grandkids and how you, you prefer the one-on-one as opposed to like the crazy loud Zoom conversations that sometimes you get, pulled
Yeah.
into, right? I'm with you there. But I like how you unpack that in this article. You just say, hey, when I'm one-on-one with someone, with a friend, with my grandkids, or a session of spiritual direction, I can focus. I can give my attention. All my senses are perked up to listen with my eyes and with my heart, as well as my own two ears. And then you said to listen is more than just hearing. There's just hearing those words with the vowels and the consonants and the syllables. There is the pause. There is the noticing, the eyes filling up with tears. There is the seeing the lump in the throat. There is sensing the nervousness or reluctance of the one beginning to tell their story. There's that space between the words that also has to be acknowledged. Listening sees everything and attempts to be curious about all that is seen and all that is not seen, but heard, and perhaps not heard at all. Um, I share that, that part of your article because I think you were just describing that this is our opportunity to re-image God. And I want to just pause and give our listeners a chance to image God, imagine God listening like that,
Mm.
full attention, not just hearing the words we're saying, but noticing the pause, noticing our eyes filling up with tears, noticing the lump in our throat, not rushing on, trying to get us to the point. We don't have to worry that God is in a hurry. And just even that sense of waiting on us through our reluctance, through our nervousness. Am I safe? So yeah, I think this whole idea of listening, Steve, and what we've been talking about is yes, by being listened to well, we are loved. And yes, we are reimagining a God who is love. We are loved into loving.
Love that. We are loved into loving. And we are loved into loving because God is listening. I'm thinking of all of the Psalms that God listened to David, all of the psalmists lament, shake their fist in his face. God listened to all of that. It's like, we don't have to protect God from our feelings and, to build an image that God's not able to hear. Listening is presence, Adam. It's presence. It's listening is honoring the essence of another glorious soul seated across from you. This is part of why I have grown to actually like Zoom work. But I know a lot of people hate it, and I've hated it. I have a love-hate relationship with it, but I am not afraid of it because,
Mhm.
like right now, I'm closer to you
Mhm.
through Zoom than you would be 10 feet away from me here in
Mhm.
my office,
Mhm.
and I would be there. But right now, I am at most 2 feet away from you. So I'm watching. I can see your eyes. I can see the reflection. I'm watching your fingers. I can get it. So it's like technology can really be a gift for us, when we settle into it and realize that it's not the devil, technology, that it really can be an aid. So I am loving it at this stage of my life, and I still, meet with people in person, but most of the people I do spiritual direction with is through Zoom.
Me too, for sure. Yes. Um, by a long shot. And I think it's wonderful that God, before we hit record, we prayed, and we prayed that God would even use this conversation into the future. So again, the technology is not our enemy, although I would agree with you that the ways we are becoming tethered to our devices and to the need to be constantly entertained and our headphones always on is not helping in our ability to
Yeah,
listen well to one another. But I totally agree that God can redeem technology in such a time as this, for God's glory and for our, again, being loved into becoming people of love, people who can receive love, can know they're loved, the beloved, and that they can also then move into the world as people of love. And we need that. We need that in this day and age.
absolutely. Yeah. I think a good exercise, Adam, that I'd just like to offer in prepping to talk with you, I just thought, I think this would really be good to suggest, and that is to make an acrostic of the word listen. So an acrostic is you take the actual letters, so LISTEN, and make an acrostic, and have you in your marriage, you as a family, build an acrostic. Have everybody at the dinner table tonight build an acrostic of what listening looks like to them.
Mhm.
So mine's going to be different, but I worked on my acrostic right before I came on here, and so I've got it it filled out. So just as an example, E under the word listen, I put eyes fixed.
Mm.
That when I listen, my eyes are fixed and they're not looking around. I'm not looking at my phone. I'm
Mhm.
not feeling vibrations. I am fixed and I am fixated on the person that is speaking, because we learn that 70% of all communication is nonverbal.
Mhm.
So body language, hands crossed or that. So to my eyes are fixed. One more that I would give is in. I wrote down now is the moment. So
Mm.
it's like now. I now is the present moment that I'm with Adam. It's not going to be tomorrow. It's not going to be too, but now, the sacredness of the now, that you're going to have put your kid to bed, your 8-year-old, your 12-year-old, your wife, your aging parents. Now is the time
Mhm.
that you want to show up, be present, to listen, and to love. So
Mhm.
I think that's a good exercise. It'd be interesting if you have a way, even on your podcast, for people to respond, and we can learn from each other, maybe in comments or something. Adam, I don't know how you could do that, but just for people to share these acrostics could be, oh, I love what you said for could I borrow it?
Yeah.
That type of thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Because it's just part of the education and the relearning. So
Yeah. I love that. I'm so thankful that you would bring something practical like that to the conversation. Thank you.
yeah,
That's who you are. I love it.
well,
Uh, I think for me, the first thought that came to mind would be no phone on the table.
oh
Like if
wow.
we were sitting together when we met for coffee or something, just the idea of not having my phone on the table, screen up, almost like just saying, I'm with you, but I'm also fully aware that I could be interrupted at any time, and that's more important. Now, I'm not
Yeah.
saying that's what everybody's doing, but that's sometimes how it feels, and that's something important to me is to not do that.
Yeah, let me tell you what that communicates to me when I meet with a person for lunch and they bring their phone out and they set it that way. I am immediately shutting down because they are communicating, they are multitasking, And to listen well, you can't multitask.
Mm.
All of me needs to be given to all of you.
Mm-hmm.
And so it just generally, sometimes I just say, hey, could we just put our phones away and not even feel any vibration?
Mm-hmm.
And for those of us that wear, bracelets and watches that signal us, it's just like that would help if we could not. We're just so time efficient these days. And the soul is not time efficient.
Mm.
The toe does not work according to a clock. And we need that space and time. And that's why in spiritual direction, I think a good practice would be to start in silence and let the directee, when you feel comfortable, you break our silence
Mm-hmm.
with how you want to begin.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm going to be with you as we're here. So there's lots of ways that we can try that and just watch the reaction. You have to experiment with what would fit you and your own style, but to integrate it. I think the big takeaway I would want to give our listeners today, Adam, is, you know, just experiment. And I like that word. Try on different things, try this, try that, all different modes of what fits your gifts and your skill and your level and who you are that honors your heart, and to lead with your ears.
I asked you earlier, of the many books you wrote, if there was one or two in particular that you think might support this language of listening, the importance of being listened to or listening well. What would you recommend from what you have written? Obviously, I'm going to share your article and link to that, but what would you suggest?
Yeah. I think there are two that would be helpful for people. The first one that I'd recommend is called Inside Job. And that is a work about doing your inner work. Before you start your work, you do your inner work. And that's the place where listening begins. In that book, we talk about learning to lead with how to have a resilient life, learning to say no. Um, but it really is about, oh my goodness, in this political climate, that how much character matters, and that we cannot sacrifice character. So that would be that book. The kind of primer for soul care that I've written is called Soul Custody, Choosing to Care for the One and Only You. And so those two books I think would be, you'd get the vintage of who I am and what I'm about, along with the Substack. The Substack, I've grown, I've changed. This is my new voice. I'm
Mm-hmm.
sharing a lot in poetry in my
Mm-hmm.
Substack. I'm writing poems because again, at 70, I'm trying to say more in fewer words. And
Mm.
poetry is my tool to do that. So I'm writing poems now, Adam.
So everyone, please find Steve's Substack. Will they find that by looking up Steve Smith, or does it need to be
No,
Stephen Smith?
the way to find it is Potter's Inn, POTTERSINN .substack.com. We love the name, of course, Potter's Inn. So we're trying to leave our work in a virtual way now through the podcast that we did for 6 years.
Mm-hmm.
And all of those are available through the Substack app. And then I'm writing probably twice a week on articles and then poetry. I'm finding, Adam, poetry is a way to slow us down, to really listen with all of our senses. And it's been a beautiful doorway to walk into. And I'm finding lots of interest in it. It's very fascinating.
Steve, I love your voice. The sound of your voice is great too, but no, I love the voice that comes from the inner place that you have been allowing God to continually speak into. I thank you for your care of so many people, but most of all, even your willingness to partner with God in the caring of your own soul. Thank you so much for being our guest today.
Thank you, Adam. Blessings.
Thank you so much, Steve. And thank you, listener. We're so grateful for your attentive curiosity with the Being Formed podcast. We hope that you will have a great day listening to God and listening to others deeply. Until next time, grace and peace.